It's really obvious that this episode doesn't need an introduction for anyone who watches Hey Arnold. But I will say that I was familiar with the show despite not being a fan of it. Like, I did remember watching episodes of it during my childhood, but just like other cartoons, I haven't grew up with it to the point that I just grew up with SpongeBob and the other cartoons from Nickelodeon. But I did remember watching the reviews centering around this episode, and when the creator wants no part of this episode after for how bad it was, I don't blame him. Believe me, when the creator wants no part of this episode, you know that this episode is far worse than the other episodes that I've talked about. It's probably on the same lengths as Foster's Everyone Knows It's Bendy, to the point that when you make the episode uncanon to the series, you know that there's a reason onto why it's uncanon. The episode begins when Arnold comes to visit to Iggy's place, and he notices that Iggy is wearing a bunny suit, and he prays to Arnold to not tell anyone at school, which Arnold promised. Unfortunately, his friends Sid and Sticky figure it out, which Arnold didn't say it to his friends. It's mainly out of coincidence that they just figured it out when Arnold stopped himself after one of them stated that it's not like Iggy was wearing a bunny suit. That's literally what really drives this episode down, is the fact that Arnold didn't tell on anyone, and the fact that it was mainly an accident. But when Sid and Stinky exposes the truth involving Iggy's secret, he refuses to forgive Arnold, and no matter what he tries to get the respect back, it just wasn't enough, to the point that it probably lasted for almost a year, since this has been going on during Christmas. And I'm not saying that because we're heading into December, because this has been going on while Iggy has been ignoring Arnold for so long that he really feels like that the gifts that Arnold has given to him just isn't enough, nor doing his chores. Mainly, all of his chores in his place. And the only way for Arnold to get the forgiveness from Iggy, you guessed it. But to tell you the truth, people have been discussing about this, so I'm gonna be saving it for later and talk about mainly the multiple problems of this Hey Arnold episode. People have been addressing that the students in Arnold's school are really unlikable for how they're making fun of Iggy in his bunny pajamas, to the point that it's honestly the most hilarious thing ever, when at the end of the day, it's not that embarrassing. And to tell you the truth, Sid and Stinky are literally the most hateable characters, because they made a promise to Arnold to keep it a secret, and they go behind Arnold's back and make it feel like Arnold has exposing the secret to everyone, even though it wasn't really the case. To no surprise, Arnold didn't do anything wrong, since it was an accident at the end of the day, and the fact that Iggy refuses to forgive Arnold for all the good things he's just trying to make up, it's honestly unbelievable to think that Iggy is still friends with Arnold. Like, how is it really possible for Arnold to be friends with him after so much time after this episode? Because as far as I'm concerned, that's a more excusable excuse to use that for how time has passed, to have Arnold be mad at Iggy in comparison to how Iggy feels towards Arnold when his secret's being exposed. Now look, I understand I need to watch more of this show to understand Iggy's character, but the way I see it, with him wearing glasses and living in an apartment of a story tall building, he's probably in a wealthy family that made him more popular, to the point that it made me convinced that he stands out differently in comparison to the other characters from this show. If you really want me to feel sympathy when it comes to him being betrayed by Arnold, here's what you should do. gave him a backstory of what really happened in his past that centers around him wearing a bunny suit or pajamas that got him really embarrassed, and the reason onto why he kept wearing the bunny suit or pajamas is the fact that he likes bunnies, which only made him more embarrassed in front of his classmates at a younger age, which is why he holds a bigger grudge against Arnold. And even though that what Arnold did is accidental, I would at least understand onto why Iggy is being really rude towards Arnold, since that in his own mind, he feels betrayed, but it somewhat makes sense in comparison to what we ended up getting from this episode. For me personally, this entire episode really feels like it's a way of just addressing on what it's like to be betrayed, but at the same time, it's done for the wrong reasons. Like, if you're going to have Arnold take the spot of betraying Iggy, which is the title, is called Arnold Betrays Iggy, then you really need to do a better execution, because Arnold just isn't the type of character that really works in this scenario, and with this being released at the end of the 1990s, it really feels like that the writers just didn't know how to come up with betray stories from what I can tell. And when it comes to how this episode is executed, they went over the top, like way over the top, to the point that Arnold's grandfather, who gave him advice on trying to make up the mistake that he did, took pictures of Arnold in the bunny pajamas. Let me tell you, the fact that this episode is attempting to make the whole betraying thing a bad thing, even though Arnold did it by accident and it just didn't feel like his character would be in this position, just sums up a lot onto why the creator wants no part of this episode. Since the creator didn't write this episode, because I'm pretty sure he wrote other episodes, he couldn't believe what he was witnessing when it comes to the final product. Because if he is so against the ending while Arnold is in the bunny pajamas and he is humiliated by so many people over something that he didn't intentionally mean to do for the sake of him betraying Iggy, then believe it or not, I'm starting to convince that he actually knows what is right for a cartoon episode to be in comparison to a bad episode that he didn't wrote. Now look, I get that the writer who has passed away has made really good episodes. I can't deny that. I may have not watched this show a lot, but I can understand that the writer had better intentions in other episodes. But when it comes to this episode, it just made me confused onto why he written the episode the way it is, especially the director who edited it the way it is. For every time I see these types of episodes, I always question onto why the mindset of what the writer's intentions are, especially the directors, but I'm just gonna say this right now. This is nowhere near as bad as Everyone Knows It's Bendy or the Imposters episode from Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. Believe me, there are a lot worse out there in comparison to this episode. The only respect I can give towards the writer who passed away is mainly the fact that he learned from his mistakes, and even though he had no participation in the Jungle movie considering he passed away, I have to admit that doesn't mean that we shouldn't forget of the good things that he did. When it comes to this episode, there's always going to be a lot of thinking on what the writers did, considering that other people may have criticized on what writers did in other bad episodes, but to tell you the truth, there's no avoiding of what bad things you did when it comes to bad episodes. As far as I'm concerned, it's always bound to happen, and just by watching this episode for the first time after watching reviews of it, it really shows that you can't avoid any negativity no matter what you do. This episode is miserable, and when I say miserable, it's miserable for all the reasons that makes this episode difficult and one of the worst from Hey Arnold. Granted, I did some research on people's perspective on the other bad episodes, but to tell you the truth, focusing on this episode really sums up a lot onto why it's described as one of the worst episodes from not only from this show, but basically any other cartoon. Whenever I think about this episode, when it comes to bad cartoon episodes, all I think of is misery. And the thing is, when I don't use the term torture, that's mainly the fact that this entire show is nothing like the other cartoons, since there was heart put into it. But there was no heart put into this episode for obvious reasons. I'm giving this episode a 1.5 out of 10.